Put the end up there.
How are we holding up?
We are holding down.
Down.
And it's coming around.
To the center of the earth.
Sugar, you're going down swinging?
In an earlier round.
It's a holdover from something else. I don't know what song you were referencing.
Like 3 different ones.
Gotcha.
Neither do either of us at this point.
Yeah. It's my mind went blank there for a second. How are we doing? It's
funny thing is, like like in terms of on the podcast, how we're doing, right?
Yeah.
But because we literally saw each other last night.
Yeah. A belated happy 4 years of podcast to us, I suppose.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
As of early February, which is kind of insane.
I suppose it was early February 2020 when we started this.
Yep.
Yeah. Granted,
Before the great pandemic.
Yeah.
Right before it was cool to start a podcast because no one was leaving their homes.
Mm-hmm. Or in the midst of people starting podcasts.
Right.
But before it was cool.
I think it had well entered into it was cool at that point.
Yeah.
It just wasn't.
Well, we launched the podcast in February. And things kicked off in
I think
March.
2020 was well in the frame of...
Yeah, that's true.
Podcasting is cool again.
Yeah.
I think like 2017 was kind of the podcast renaissance.
The accessibility of the hardware had hit sort of a perfect point for when the pandemic happened.
And the accessibility of the software too.
Yep.
Because
and
when
the platforms.
I was early in college, well, that's kind of what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like early on in college, I had to like copy paste a link to an RSS feed into an RSS application, and I'd have to like scroll through raw XML to find episode files, and it was just so painful to try to listen to a podcast. And then
Unless you had iTunes.
unless you were on iTunes,
Yeah.
because they've had infrastructure for
But
that.
it being
iPod has-
Apple, it's more exclusive than that, or was for a long time.
You
because it was
have to own an Apple device to use it.
Yeah, because podcast from the iPod.
Indeed.
Gosh, today's kids will never understand iPod.
I don't understand iPod. Like
It's got a weird sort of touch control wheel thing.
See,
Yeah.
I went to public school in 2008 when the iPod Touch became a brand new thing.
yeah.
It was like, wow.
But yeah, 4 years, granted with some breaks here and there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it wasn't 4 consistent years. And
no, but the first 3 were pretty consistent.
First 2.5.
2.5, yeah. Pretty consistent. And I mean, we're still doing it. So
Yeah.
that's good.
yeah.
We tried streaming for a bit.
Well, when we were short a person.
Yeah. It was it was an experiment.
Yeah, it was a fun experiment. I don't regret it.
No. It was fun. Will I ever finish editing the footage? Looking increasingly less likely by the day, but maybe who knows?
Who knows, indeed.
Um,
I was just, at the very least, like a highlight reel of my my madness at Frogger.
yes. Oh, yes. That's gotta happen.
Incredibly
Oh,
fun.
yeah. And Warthog
Yes.
in the Halo playthrough.
Yes.
At least we got Uku in there.
We did. I got to make the nipple chicken thumbnail.
Yep. But yeah, no, it's been a fun 4 years, I guess, of podcasting.
4 years of media partnership.
Yeah.
Last episode count, I think, was like 130. So
like 138.
We're at just over 50% of the weeks in that. No, yeah, more like 60% of the weeks in that
on
time
average
frame.
every other week for those 4 years.
On average.
Yeah.
For the first 2, pretty consistently every week.
Right.
And then that 1 year, there was hardly any.
Yeah.
And then now kind of honestly averaging out to every other week.
I don't remember if I deleted our SoundCloud account because that's where we uploaded like the first 3 episodes, and then our free uploads ended, and we had to come up with a different solution. So the podcast, like the date on Spotify, is like not exactly when we started, but pretty dang close. Although it might have let us backfill like the dates when we.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it just treats whatever the RSS feed has in it as canonical.
So yeah, this will be episode 139, which is pretty cool. Creeping towards 200. It doesn't feel like all that long ago. We just did our 100th episode.
I mean, it was only 30 episodes ago.
38 episodes.
38 episodes ago.
But that was also 2 years.
Yeah.
Because we were pretty darn consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those first 2.
We were. There have been great episodes. There's been episodes where
There's a few I'd run back if I had the chance.
Yeah, there's a couple I'm like, I could take a second look at that and do better research or have it better planned out or actually watch the Flamin' Thing just prior to doing the episode. But
or the entirety of our attempt at talking about the MCU altogether.
but there's a...
That's experimental.
It was.
That was like the first
very early.
10 episodes we did.
I hadn't even come up with goofy titles yet.
But there's a solid chunk of that run that is not cringe.
Yes.
And I'm proud of that.
I have yet to go back and listen to any of those.
See, I still need to go back and listen to Avatar, having seen the actual show now.
Yeah. Oh, yes. John's first guest appearance.
Indeed.
Will he come back on? Probably at some point. Maybe. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
Plausible.
You never know.
It could happen.
It's been a minute since we've had a guest.
Yeah.
We had Isaac a couple months ago.
Yeah, that's true. And then just Isaac. And we had Adam Carr.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
And then their podcast subsequently died.
Rip.
Um,
John and Faith, of course.
Naturally.
And Brian.
And Bryant was on the
Starcraft.
StarCraft one that I also haven't listened to.
well, because those were the ones
Those are the
weren't
two
on.
I wasn't there for.
Okay.
I think you are the most consistent person on the podcast.
There has yet to be an episode I'm not on.
Well, that's because
There was one instance where you guys wanted to record.
it's because you recorded on your computer and you're the guy that runs
still are.
everything.
Yeah. Well, James, what's your password? And then I didn't see it until it was like way too late.
Exactly.
Um,
So no, like I am second to you in
consistency as a recurring character on this podcast.
You're kind of the main character of the podcast.
Thanks, Nathan. I am the main character. I'm the producer. We'll go with that.
Yeah, there we go.
It's it's been a good time, and I've been remembering that Twitter exists a little more recently. So
Yes, quite.
Engaging with the 2 followers on there, as it were.
Not as it were, it just is.
It is.
It simply is.
Yeah.
The 2 are the 2, no matter where they are.
Exactly.
Always 2 there are.
No more.
No more.
No less. Yeah, it's been fun. We're gonna keep on rolling with it and evolve as we must.
And we're not gonna do episodes every week because we have lots of stuff going on in our lives.
So much
and we
stuff
just
going
keep
on.
adding more.
Yes.
Yep. And also it's like it's hard to
like literally not a single weeknight.
Yeah, not anymore anyway.
And especially after Easter, if this new thing
Yeah.
happens, like we're literally going to have
Every single
0
night.
weeknights
Yeah.
that aren't accounted for. Granted, we kind of have 2 of those, at least one loosely penciled for podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
But the other thing is, like, we need to watch things for the podcast or
When the
consume
heck are we
media, at
going
least.
to do that?
when are we going to do that?
And also, I would like to do so to engage with media for leisure also occasionally.
Just for fun.
Yeah, just for
When
fun.
are we going to do
Because, like, I mean, obviously we like stuff with the depth
that we wouldn't
can
be able to put on the
discussed.
podcast? Yeah.
But also, like, you don't have to have deep things with deep
No.
themes to talk about for hours on end. Sometimes dumb fun is just dumb fun.
Sometimes you need to drink beer and watch the Rankin Bass Hobbit.
I love that. I still need to find a way, like some copy of the Rankin Bass Return of the King, which is like, it's like The Hobbit which it shouldn't be, but it is anyway. And it is a mess, and I love it.
Yeah.
It's like watching it's like the inverse of the Hobbit live action films, except it's more fun
Is
to
it
watch
different
happen.
from the Ralph Bakshi?
It is different from the Ralph Bakshi, which I do also have.
Okay.
Which is weird in its own way. Like half of the film is like rotoscoped and half of it isn't, and it's like weird and uncanny, and it like awkwardly slams together the first like of Fellowship and Two Towers,
Yeah.
and into a amount of time that is too small for those two stories to be contained, but it does so anyway.
Yeah.
It's interesting at the very least.
To that point, the only film adaptation of The Lord of the Rings.
Yes, it was the first like serious attempt. Although apparently there had been several attempts to get it off the ground by various people over the years. Allegedly one where they tried to cast the Beatles as the Four Hobbits, which would have been interesting.
I mean, the weed part would check out. Pipe weed.
But no, that seems like for a while there's a couple like big pieces of like media of like literature that for a time were like the golden goose of we got to adapt this to film, and if we do it right, it'll be the best thing ever. If we don't, it'll be awful.
Narnia.
Narnia, well, yeah,
The BBC.
BBC Narnia. I think who was I talking to that thought that was the only adaptation of Narnia? Was that you?
It was not me.
It was not you,
No.
but
I've
I remember
seen
talking
the
to
Disney
somebody
one.
who I had talked about Narnia, and they were like, their only reference for a Narnia movie was the BBC Narnia, and they thought it sucked. And I was like, no, Narnia was
See,
great.
like when I was, a youngin, went to the library, requested for what I thought was, one of the new Disney ones, and got the BBC
I see.
Narnia,
Yeah.
and was sorely disappointed.
Yes. Okay. Maybe that was it.
I feel like there was something
It's
like
like when
that.
your mom goes to get A Bug's Life, but then comes back with the movie Ants, which is just Starship Troopers for insects.
I feel like there was like some point where we ordered something, whether it was like on the library or on Netflix, thinking it was one thing, but got like a different version and were completely weirded out by it. But I don't recall what it was specifically.
There's this incredibly horrible. So excuse me, at the library, did you guys ever get like the green bags with like the collections of like certain children's books and different things like that?
Okay.
Maybe some videos and stuff in there. They had those at the Detroit Lakes Library. They would have like these packs of like, here's like a ready-made like kit of like stories for your kids to read,
Yeah.
and then they have like puppets or something in there and videos. One kit that we got had something to do with history, I think. And
Naturally.
I was supposed to do a book report on Leif Erickson, right? Or like a little history essay on Leif Erickson. The worst freaking Adobe Flash cartoon with like the awful. It's like it's so good that it's horrible to look at. I found it on YouTube recently. Like the lip syncing doesn't match. Everything is just so janky about it. But somebody paid money for this to be produced. And it has very little to do with the real history at all.
Naturally.
But it was like one of those things that was just so awful we couldn't look away, and we watched it multiple times.
It hurts so good.
Yes.
There are some of those
I need to find
like
it.
car fire pieces of children's media
Yeah.
that are
Made by
just
some
like,
obscure like latchkey studio
Mhm.
somewhere. After this I think I need to find and show you guys a sample of it. It is
We should find a time to do that after Lent so we can have alcohol to go with it.
yeah. Watch the entirety of yeah. Like imagine somebody trying to pull off the look of like a Ralph Bakshi film but with like crappily composited like in After Effects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of that kind of cheap animation in my childhood, particularly like you watch. Did either of you ever watch those like CCC Lives of
Yeah.
the Saints cartoons?
Actually, the animation
The
wasn't
animation
bad.
was fine. It was just cheap television quality.
Yeah. par for the course at the time.
Right.
Oh gosh, there was that. John found that CCC abstinence cartoon
Wait, what?
at the library at the school he works for. Like, I forgot they made that. It is like just as cheesy 90s as you can imagine that would be.
Oh, dear me.
Hey, baby, how about a kiss? Like, all that kind of stuff. Like, imagine.
It's like if Link was one of the
It's like
characters.
if
Link from the old cartoon.
It's like very much in that flavor of like dialogue and stuff. I was bored at work at my previous job, and so started watching this and was like physically like angry, but also like fascinated by this thing. This embodies everything that was horrible about Christian media in the 90s.
And yet.
It is so brilliant because of that. Oh man. Yeah, it was that was an experience. But yeah, no, the ones I'd watched were like the Bernadette one, or
Yeah.
the stupid girl with the like $1 million bracelet that got stolen by those buffoonish.
The Guardian Angel one.
The Guardian Angel one.
Yeah. I remember thinking,
A noticeable
this is
lack
dumb
of
and weird.
Yes.
Like, sure, I'd watch like there was St. Patrick or St. whatever else.
Yeah, those are
Like,
fine.
Yeah, those are fine. It's like it glossed over the
Slavery
finer
part.
points and a bunch of the other like things about their lives. But it's like, it gets the bullet points across. He picks up a shamrock at some point.
I think I've mentioned how my little brothers thought in the St. Nicholas episode that the Roman soldiers were the good guys. So they would, when they would be like 2 and 3 years old, just like walk up to us, be like, "Get down, Christian! Don't touch me, Christian!"
Oh no!
Entirely missing the point.
But they had the cool armor.
They're rounding up, obviously, the bad guys.
Obviously, the bad guys. You see a group of people in authority rounding up people and taking them to a camp of some kind. They must be the good guy.
Never mind the fact they imprisoned the main character. Yeah. It was CCC Cartoons. You had to be there.
Speaking of soldiers.
Speaking of imprisoning the main character.
Yeah. We're the Palladium Papists. I'm James.
I'm Nathan.
And I'm Riley.
We're doing Philmosophical today on Bridge of Spies.
In a world where one man will decide whether to pull a lever and kill one man, or not pull a lever and allow 5 people to die, find out in Philmosophical.
So yeah, we watched this at the Fishers a couple of weeks ago, altogether too late at night, but it was
Well, I
still a
had
good
left
time.
because it was
Yeah.
It was altogether too late.
Okay. Even for you two, which is
By the time we got
By
done,
the
it was
time
like
we
12:30.
started, it was altogether too
like,
late for
it was
Nathan.
like 10:30.
right.
And I got home and went to sleep very late that night. Regardless, so I have to try to remember the name, but starring Tom Hanks. The movie came out, I want to say like 2014 or something like that.
That sounds right.
Bridge of Spies.
Audibly Google's Bridge of
2015.
Spies.
Okay, I just want to remember the name of the guy. It's directed by Steven Spielberg. It's about and the screenplay was written by the
Coen
brothers, which is interesting.
That's a good combination of talent, actually.
James Donovan is a lawyer played by Thomas Hanks, and it's 1950s America, Cold War. The Reds are, everything's gonna end in a nuclear hellfire if we aren't careful. And he's a insurance claims lawyer on the East Coast. So he's a World War II veteran with I believe with a long sort of well established. He's a highly regarded lawyer by his peers. For this,
Sally nailed it.
yeah. For this reason, so the FBI has arrested a man named Rudolph Abel, who is being accused of being a spy for the Soviets. And so in order to try and demonstrate to the Russians that we are a country with due process and so forth, they want to give him a fair trial, albeit with a lot of.
They want to give him a trial.
They want to give him a trial.
They want to have the
necessarily.
They wanna
appearance
convict him.
of due
They want-
process.
Everybody wants to convict him. However, they want to show that they are giving due process. So that, technically speaking, so they
See
bring
this, Russia? We're, air quotes, fair.
on. We're the better men. And James Donovan agrees reluctantly to take on the job of this guy's defense lawyer. However, being a man of integrity in his profession, he makes clear that he's going to treat this as a normal case and do his best to be a good defense attorney. So because of this, strangely, even though he was asked by people who held him in high regard, because of this, he is sort of there's a lot of pushback, and once his name gets in the newspapers, there's people like shooting at his house and all kinds of crazy stuff because he's trying to give a fair defense to.
He's trying to help those dang Reds.
Yeah. So he, he goes through the case and finds different errors with like the way the FBI conducted the arrests, and they didn't have proper warrants and all this stuff, but all to no avail. The judge basically says straight up, we're convicting this guy. Like, thank you for doing this, but you're not going to change the outcome. But he does manage to persuade the judge to withhold the death penalty because he has the foresight to be like, okay, at some point, it's the Cold War. Each side has spies in the other's country, and we're doing stuff. We should keep this guy alive in the event we need to do a prisoner exchange if they have one of our guys. And lo and behold, there's the U-2 spy plane program at the time being run by the CIA where they're flying over
Being
the
run
Soviet.
by Bono.
Yeah. They are not quite Bloody Sunday, but not quite in the name of love either. They're going over Russia with these spy planes and taking lots of pictures, thinking they can't be detected because they're at such high altitude. Spoiler alert, they can still be detected by radar. And so one of the spy planes gets shot down, and Gary Powers, the American pilot, fails to properly blow up the plane to like erase the evidence, and also fails to poison himself with the secret like silver dollar thing to avoid himself being captured by the Russians. So he is now captured by the Russians. And also at this time, the Berlin Wall is being constructed in Berlin to keep people from escaping from East Germany into West Germany. So in the midst of this chaos, an American grad student gets stuck on the wrong side of the Berlin Wall. And because he's an American grad student, they suspect him of being a spy. And so the East German government, which is basically a puppet of the Russians, takes him into custody. So, and this is a little while after the conviction and upholding of, like the life sentence for Rudolf Abel that he was able to secure. So a sort of covert message had been sent by ostensibly Rudolf Abel's family in East Germany, thanking James Donovan for being a good defense lawyer for their quote unquote husband,
And quote unquote father.
yeah. And so because of all this whole thing being about Russian spies, the CIA has sort of been talking to Donovan and being like, let's keep this incident in our back pocket in case we need to follow this up and see where it goes. So Gary Powers has been imprisoned, and as well as I'm trying to remember the name of the grad student kid, but and as time goes along, they're like, okay, the Russian government is willing to do a prisoner exchange, but we need you as a private citizen to facilitate this with this lawyer in East Germany for the quote unquote family of Abel. So he goes over to Berlin with the CIA following him around and giving him directions and stuff. And he tells his family he's on a fishing trip because obviously he can't really talk about any of this. So he gets to the Russian embassy and meets the quote unquote family of Abel and realizes that it's just a sham, cover for the guy. And they're quickly sort of dismissed and aren't really relevant to the picture. But he begins talking to the KGB/Russian diplomat guy at the embassy, and they begin negotiating for the release of Gary Powers. During the negotiations, Donovan catches wind of this American student who's also wrongfully detained. But it turns out that this is East German, the government of East Germany. To this point, they haven't been recognized as a government by any major government. So they're trying to battle for legitimacy by bribing the Americans with like the release of the student in return for recognition as a sovereign power. So all this is going on, and Donovan is like, you know what? I think I'm gonna get both of these guys. I'm gonna work my way I'm gonna negotiate into it. And meanwhile, the CIA is like, no, we only care about our guy, the pilot. Don't worry about this other kid. Like, we'll figure out a different way to get him out. It's like, no, I think I can do it. So he manages to pull leverage on the East German government people and be like, hey, it's either both of them or nothing at all. And if the Russians find out that you screwed up this prisoner exchange deal, that'll be trouble for you. Sort of calling their bluff on wanting to be recognized as a legitimate government apart from Russia, and showed up for the lackeys of the Soviet Union that they were. It ultimately works. And so on this bridge in Berlin, they do the prisoner swap, and Donovan gets to bring the people home. Both the student and the American spy plane pilot. And he goes home, and it's revealed on the news that this had occurred, and like the country is grateful to James Donovan and all this stuff, and his family gets to find out like the sacrifice he's made and stuff, because it's sort of been a point of tension between him and his wife, his dedication to being the defense lawyer for the spy, despite the costs to their family. But she understands like, oh wait, these are the things he has done for his country and for his family and stuff. So that's kind of where the movie ends. There's more in depth we can get to it. But yeah, I guess some cool things we liked about the movie. For me, Standing Man. Yes, I think that was sort of the most intriguing dialogue in the film. So, being the defense lawyer, Donovan talks to Abel, on a number of occasions. They get to know each other and form a sort of professional attorney-client, almost kind of a friendship.
Insofar as they can, knowing that they are
both under
kind of their enemies in point of fact, men who have respect for one another, but at the end of the day,
scrutiny,
yes,
as well.
But Abel develops this clear like respect for Donovan.
He's like, despite being my enemy outwardly, you're still fighting for me to not die.
Mm-hmm.
You're fighting for what you see as just and humane. I mean, in a certain sense, like it would be the intelligent, rational thing to execute the guy. But the United States wants to show, hey, we're humane. We're willing to spare the life of this man to show that we have some moral integrity.
Mm-hmm. And Donovan, he's been working in insurance law. He's made clear, well, he hasn't done a defense case in years, but he believes in his professional integrity and his desire for justice that he should take on this case. And Abel, in one of their meetings, sort of tells this story about this guy that his dad pointed out to him when he was a kid growing up in early communist Russia. His dad told him, I forget if his dad or his grandpa or whatever, but keep an eye on this guy that the family knew.
Who was the most unremarkable guy you'd ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing special about him.
Mm-hmm. And then one day, like, these partisans came around and, like, demanded money and started beating up the family. And every time they would beat up this man, he would stand up again. And every time they'd yell at him to get down, and they beat him up again, and he would stand back up. So they started calling him Standing Man. And Abel's like, that's who you remind me of, is this guy who refuses to back down in the face of adversity, but lives a very simple, otherwise unremarkable life. Sort of that unseen strength. So that's a pretty cool piece of dialogue. I also thought it was cool at the beginning how like he was talking about this accident case where he's trying to work with this other lawyer who's trying to get insurance money out of him. It's like, your guy hit, he's not my guy, he's my client. He hit 5 of my clients while they were riding their motorcycles as he was driving his car. It's like, right, this is one accident. You can't ask it to be 5 accidents.
It's one thing.
Conversely, yeah, it's one thing. And he takes that. It's a cool sort of foreshadowing of in the end where he manages to like do all this wheeling and dealing to get 2 prisoners for one in a.
No, it's one thing.
Yeah, it's one thing. It's one package. I have to figure out. Eventually, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was also
Like
asked.
in real life outside the film.
Yeah, they mentioned this in like the end title card.
Right. When you right before the credits, when they're like, he went on to do this and this and this in the way that biopics like to do.
He was also, there was this failed attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro with Cuban expatriates funded by the CIA. That went incredibly wrong. I'm trying to find the numbers. Basically, he was sent to try to he was trying to let's see if I
mitigate disaster in short.
He was trying to arrange for prisoner exchange. Similar, or like the release of a bunch of prisoners from this event.
Because he's just their go-to guy for that now.
I'm trying to remember. I guess talk more about what you like while I try to find this, because it's an astonishing amount.
Yes. Yeah, we hit the 2 main things I wanted to talk about in it, but I think there was an interesting kind of, if not thorough exploration, opposing of the question, what is justice? What does it mean to be just? And I think the film explores the idea of justice and the idea of being American and what that means. Because he's like, what makes us all American? You know, I'm Donovan. My family's Irish. You're German. This guy he's talking to. And he's like, what makes us American? What makes us united? It is our adherence to this thing we call the Constitution. Our agreement to live by this set of rules and by this justice. And if we abandon that justice for the sake of expediency, we lose our identity. We lose what it means to be American, and we lose what it means to be just.
Like there's a reason the American way is lumped in with truth and justice traditionally, because it's like those are the values that the country was supposedly founded on.
So, yeah, after the Bay of Pigs, he was tasked to get negotiation to free 1,113 prisoners. At the end of it, at the end of negotiations, he had secured the release of 9,703 men, women, and children from Cuban detention. So
when it started with 1,000, went up to 9,000.
Yes. So that's
what
like,
does the scanner have to say about his power level? What? Over 9,000.
But yeah, it's like an even more like stark instance than like the
2 for 1 deal.
Yeah. That was quite astonishing. So a rather interesting man. And yeah, the dialogue and the pacing and the writing of this, obviously, like the Coen brothers are pretty. We've talked about their films. And,
Coen brothers and Spielberg on this. That sounds.
It's a great combo.
I should watch it.
Yeah.
I should have watched it.
Cinematography's good. They really capture the stark contrast between the sort of prosperity of 1950s Americana vis-a-vis the stark deprivation of the basic comforts of life in the Eastern Bloc.
And they didn't even need to use an orange filter?
Nope.
No?
Just gray.
Just gray, okay.
Mm-hmm.
If it's Europe, it's a gray filter.
It's black and white almost.
Yeah. But if it's like anywhere toward the equator, you gotta throw an orange filter over everything.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
I think the Coen brothers have this knack for subtle satire of idiosyncratic people, or like people with like sort of very minor character flaws, but like bringing those to the fore in interesting ways. And that plays out especially in this guy who is quote unquote the lawyer in East Germany for Rudolf Abel, who turns out to be a high ranking government official in East Germany.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to make these overtures to Donovan, and he drives him around in like a fancy sports car, and he's trying to play these power games to like get him to take him seriously. It's like, we want to be taken seriously by the United States and the rest of the world. And then overall, Donovan like manages to beat him at his game, but I found that whole exchange to be pretty interesting.
They're good at making very characterful characters, in my experience. Where it's like there's a
Was
like
that Pierce Brosnan?
they're kind of grounded by their idiosyncrasies. Where it's like, oh wait, I've talked to somebody like that, or like, because everybody has their idiosyncrasies, whether and sort of to bring those kind of weirditudes to the forefront of a character makes them memorable in a way that doesn't feel artificial when it's done right.
Yeah.
And that's something that, from my experience with their films, which is
Oh Brother, Where Art
Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, Fargo, and No Country for Old Men.
Oh, the Will from Stranger Things was in this. I had no idea that was him. He's like his son.
Huh.
Anyway,
This was been well before Stranger Things.
yeah,
This was on the cusp of Stranger Things.
like a couple years
Didn't it?
2014?
17 is when
17, I think, was about when
Stranger Things came out, and this
Yeah.
was 15. So
Oh, okay.
Not
So
too
it was
far
only.
away.
But yeah. Anyway, in all the Coen brothers written films I've seen, there are these just really memorable, striking characters.
yeah, I
And
think that's really insightful. Like they bring out the oddity without making it seem cheesy or overbearing. I think that'd be a tough thing to do.
Because, I mean, you meet people and people are odd, but like to characterize them in a way without making it feel like a cartoonish exaggeration, while also being an exaggeration for the medium of film. Because if it's a side character that only says a few lines,
It exaggerates it enough to bring it out, but not so much that it becomes a caricature.
right, it adds to the character of the overall film. There's like a contour and a atmosphere that a little quirkiness. Just a little quirky. So quirky. Although this film, I imagine, is quite a bit more grounded, but still has time for that, depending on what characters they want to highlight or how, like, self-important the people of East Germany wants to appear as, kind of a thing.
and they sort of there's a great touch where it's like in this big like stateroom or whatever, and like the boss of the guy that Donovan had been talking to, he's like the attorney general or something for East Germany, and it's like in this big cold empty like conference room, but it looks like such a veneer of grandeur, but it's a very cold dark room with like crappy dishware and like a bunch of maids who are cleaning the place while they're talking, and like scared to death of what the guy has to say. And there's this big phone on the desk he uses to talk to people, but it doesn't work the first couple times he uses it. Little moments like that I just got a kick out of.
And Tom Hanks in the hotel,
Yeah.
he's just like rolls up, orders a massive American breakfast at the place he's not supposed to be, and the CIA guy gets mad at him for doing that. And he's like, I forget what precipitated him leaving, but he just leaves behind the whole breakfast.
I think
there's
he's
new
like, wait a minute,
developments.
I think I came up with an idea how to get this student out.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
and he'll have to go do that. And so he sort of flaunts the CIA a bit, because at the time, like, they were sort of the tip of the spear of like the American effort in the Cold War. But he stands up to them consistently. I mean, like, cooperates with them in as much as he can. But he also, like, in the case of Abel, they're trying to get him to reveal what he's been talking to Abel about in his attorney-client meetings. He's like, no, that's attorney-client privilege. I can't tell you any of this stuff. So,
he even stands firm for justice against his own people.
mm-hmm. The CIA is like, yeah, we got our guy. You don't need to worry about this kid. We'll figure out something else. Like, clearly not all that interested in this kid ever getting out. So he manages to flaunt them in that as well and get both of the people. And, you know, eventually it's like, okay, fine. He did all this for us. We will humor him with getting this college student out. So, yeah, just a fascinating person. A really there's historical biopics that are rather formulaic. This one managed to, I think Spielberg, like, in as much as the Coen brothers have a knack for meditating on the ordinary, so does Steven Spielberg, I think. At least in his historical projects, because he focuses on the ordinary people that do extraordinary things. Between this and, like, say, Saving Private Ryan
or Schindler's List, or
yeah. So I think that follows very much
kind of that everyday heroism, that standing man type of thing,
as a sort of foil to the great man theory of history, where, like, these great figures are the ones who accomplish these sweeping changes, when in reality it's just people in ordinary situations that called upon to do extraordinary things.
People in ordinary situations called to great courage.
Mm-hmm.
It's all, we've got examples of that.
Like a green onion
Catholics
who has to talk to her zucchini husband to prevent all of her people from being murdered by the Mr. Lund.
Okay, maybe I wasn't thinking quite that, but that works too. I'm down for that one.
I don't know why Esther just popped in my head.
Because that was like the whole tagline. It's like, hey, she was queen. But
they were going to get
like...
sent to the island of perpetual tickling.
Yeah. That's.
What were you going to say?
I don't know. It's like there's almost a saint-like heroic quality to that.
It is something that we as Catholics can recognize. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, obviously being not equivalent.
No, not equivalent, but like just in general, there's that.
It's a recognition of that sort of biblical archetype, right? Where you have prophets called out of, David was a shepherd. Moses was just a dude in exile from his country who had it with a speech impediment or something along those lines. Like several of the judges were just dudes hanging out, and an angel showed up and they're like, hey, go kill the Philistines. And they're like, cool, we'll do that. And then saints,
just
running the gamut.
The Lord of the universe was a carpenter for about 30 years.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think they understand that notion.
And that's also just generally universally inspiring to say anyone can be great, where if they act heroically when presented with the great trial.
Spielberg and his generation are sort of the last vestige of the old Hollywood that at least understood the Christian environment in which they grew up and brought that to film. Since then, there's been a dramatic decline. Obviously not the single cause of the decline in film. However, a marked decline in my opinion. Just when you throw out the anthropology and like the understanding of how to bring that to storytelling and film of the Christianity and Christendom of the past 2,000 years and try to do something different, it's starting to wither on the vine a bit. So I find that interesting. Because his movies are sort of seen as like the great classics of the last 30 years.
They're like the modern classics, essentially.
Mm-hmm. And him and his generation of the people that worked at like ILM and like,
made all the technical breakthroughs that made the the technology we have for film today possible.
Mm-hmm. And the writers, of that generation, they're sort of the last bulwark of the people who get it, instead of I need to self-insert this to death. With my writing, kind of a thing. But that's sort of a tangent. I guess we've talked mainly about the stuff we like about Bridge of Spies. So
yeah,
watch it, Nathan. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's on the list. Where can I watch it?
I don't know,
because I know you watched it at
they had
John's
it on DVD.
house. They had it on DVD.
I think they borrowed it.
Oh, from the
library.
Yeah.
So go support my local library, I guess.
Yeah. Truth. What are truths we can find in Bridge of Spies?
Justice.
Yes.
Justice.
And it's important.
Mhm.
And
I suppose you could say creed
creed.
unites. Although in a liberal secularist sort of way. Not in the same way as we would understand it, but
Right, but there's something in that.
mhm.
I would perhaps someday like to have a broader discussion about what it means to be American and how
Yeah.
that fundamentally it leads to where we are today,
Mhm.
the radical disunity that we find ourselves in.
Mm.
I don't think you can do the American project without ending up here,
Mhm.
but that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah. You could it at least grasp.
There was an accidental unity, and by accidental I don't mean oops, how did this happen? It was like it wasn't essential to what each person individually believed, but it happened to be all agreed upon by Americans, and it
Until it
worked
wasn't.
as long as that lasted,
Mm-hmm.
and it has not worked since people have stopped agreeing upon that. It's the fatal flaw of it, but there's something inspiring about that, and I think it gets at the desire for unity that is in our nature as human beings.
Especially in the face of what was viewed as an existential threat. Because, I mean, it was.
It was.
Nuclear war was and is a real possibility. Although then it far more immediate.
Mm-hmm.
When they kind of touch on this, like kids of our parents' generation had to watch videos.
Yertle the turtle
Yeah.
says duck and cover.
That wasn't actually going to do anything. If a nuke's coming,
But it
you're
made
gonna
you
die.
feel like it was, and
Yeah.
that's the point.
But kids were traumatized by these images of nuclear hellfire.
Understandably.
Understandably so, yeah. So it was just a very wild time. And to still be in that atmosphere, to still be able to uphold the values of justice under the law, despite everybody in your country wanting to forego that because of, I guess, fear and desire to push back against that existential threat in an immediate way with this guy.
But like, what is courage but action in the face of fear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting to, we see a little bit of like the prisoners, and Donovan makes the point that, each of these men, all they did was serve their country. Abel was here to spy in the U.S. because that's what his country asked him to do. And he did his job well and never gave up any state secrets. Or he never gave up any of his, like classified information. Same deal with the American guy that they managed to get back. He never cracked and like gave away any information despite some intense interrogation, in like a stark contrast to the way Abel was treated in the United States. However, they there was this exchange on the bridge, like as he's about to hand Abel back to the Soviets, where he's talking about like, how do you think they'll receive you when you get back? Are they just gonna like kill you as like retribution or something? And he was like, well, watch and see what happens. If they embrace me, then yeah, I'll be regarded as a hero. If they just show me the back door of the car, who knows what will happen? And they just show him the back door of the car. Now, I think, well, the movie says he went on to live with a long, happy life with his wife, which sort of is ambiguous, but he
bespeaks the point that his family was fake,
mm-hmm.
and that may have just been a line they fed him.
Yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah. So Abel is an interesting character because there's many instances in which he's like, Donovan's like, aren't you afraid of like the idea of a death penalty? And he's like,
would it help?
Would it help? Just sort of very matter-of-factly approaches life. Because, yeah, it's a contrast for him and what he I wouldn't even say he's really fighting for anything. He's just doing as he's told. Because that's just sort of the contrast between the Soviet Union and the United States is doing what you're told versus striving for an ideal. But I guess we got beyond this.
That's all still true.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Because men are capable of doing things for both. It's not as if you can only die for your country if you truly believe in all of its ideals. You can also die for your country because you're simply told to and you have no other choice. And that's sort of something the film shows. Yeah. As well as like the people who are so desperate to leave that like you see people trying to run across like the Berlin Wall and getting shot to death by the guards, that sort of thing. So just a very, very different time. Goodness, what is good in Bridge of Spies, Donovan.
Standing man. He just keeps getting up. Even when they shoot at his house.
Yeah.
Even when they drag his name through the mud in the newspapers.
When even the people who had like asked him to take on this defense case, give him the cold shoulder and take,
important
cases away
clients
from him.
away from him.
Yeah.
And his family is like, stop it. Don't do that. Kind of out of this, again, fear of retribution and
legitimate fear of retribution.
And indeed it happens, but there's an ideal to be stood for, and he stands for it.
Beauty. We've talked a lot about like the writing of the film is quite good. The cinematography and stuff is, it's Spielberg, so it's good. The presentation of the Cold War, like the set design, costume work, all that stuff is great. It's interesting too because you don't really see the Eastern Bloc side of it very much, but they sort of show a sliver of what it was like to live under those conditions. In East Berlin, the Soviets during World War II had lost millions of people fighting against the Nazis. So as sort of a retribution, they refused to allow East Berlin to properly rebuild. They kept the buildings bombed out as they were basically in 1945. The people were living in abject poverty, and there's roving gangs of young men just about the streets because they have nothing else to do. There's no work. The economy's crap. Things are desperate. So, yeah, that part of it I found interesting. And just the sharp contrast where even just going to the American Hilton Hotel in West Berlin, like there's all these people dressed nicely, drinking coffee, eating a big American breakfast in this hotel, where across the wall from them people are living like starving. And it's an interesting contrast. So, unity, what brings it all together?
Justice. Justice.
And compassion over just sheer survival. Because Donovan recognizes, first in Abel's case, like on a human level, he doesn't want this man to be executed for simply doing his job. And he wants to uphold the law and give this man a fair trial. And he also has sort of the practical sense to facilitate the eventual prisoner exchange that happens. Also, he takes pity on this poor American college student that got stuck in the wrong place at the wrong time and is being brutally imprisoned. When nobody else seems to want to help him, he goes out of his way, risks his entire mission to also bring this kid back. So, yeah, sort of justice and compassion are two I guess, yeah, two themes of unity that run through the film. So, any other comments? I think we mostly hit it. So, yeah, that was the movie. That's Bridge of Spies.
Yeah.
So, good episode. This is fun. I like historical movies, especially stuff with meat to it.
Well, yes.
Especially
Especially when it's like, ooh, in the beauty section, I can talk about how accurate the costumes were and how the set design was good in East Germany.
Because I keep an eye for that sort of things when most people just want the drama.
It's like, as long as the American guys are wearing like green suits, it doesn't matter. But it does because they're the differences over time or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. You can send us questions, comments, concerns, or complaints to palladiumpapist@gmail.com. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. Stay tuned for future episodes. It'll probably end up being a cadence of every other week at this rate. But yeah, we'll talk to you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.